Breaking news, a leaked transcript of a call between
Halo
Trump
semua,
envoy Steve
jangan
Witkoff
lupa
and one of
subscribe,
Putin's top
like,
aides.
dan komen.
Witkoff, a real estate
Serta
lawyer,
share
according to
di
a transcript published by Bloomberg, is
yang
quoted
lain
advising a
agar
senior
yang
Kremlin
lain
aide
bisa
last month about how to
menikmati.
strike a deal with Trump.
Terima
And he
kasih.
urges the aide to praise Trump on his Gaza deal as a way to curry favor and get Trump on board. Here's the quote. From Witkoff. He says, just reiterate that you congratulate the president on this achievement, that you supported it, that you respect that he is a man of peace, and you're really glad to have seen it happen. Putin's aide replies to Witkoff, I agree with you that he will congratulate. He will say that Mr. Trump is a real peace man and so and so. Well, that's exactly what happened. Putin called Trump 2 days later. That's the day they spoke for 2.5 hours, if you remember. And Trump called that conversation very productive. Well, the following day, Zelensky visited the White House, and that had been sort of set up in the anticipation that Trump was going to provide Ukraine those longer-range missiles. Well, that could hit Moscow. But after the call with Putin, Zelensky shows up, and boom, no, request denied. Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, seeing all of these transcripts, tweeting, quote, this is a major problem and one of the many reasons why these ridiculous sideshows and secret meetings need to stop. Allow Secretary of State Marco Rubio to do his job in a fair and objective manner. Republican Congressman Don Bacon also posting, quote, it's clear Witkoff fully favors the Russians. He should be fired. Blunt words. It comes as Trump and Zelensky apparently now agree on some points of a possible peace deal. And guess who Trump has dispatched to meet with Putin to talk about it? Steve Witkoff. Out front now, Christo Grozev, investigative journalist who has been placed on Russia's wanted list. And Christo, I appreciate your time tonight. So Russia says some of these transcripts that Bloomberg has are fake. The White House is not denying their veracity. It simply says that the reporting proves Witkoff talks to officials every day to achieve peace. What's your reporting, Christo? I know you've got a lot of new information here.
Well, first of all, this is probably an unprecedented leak from my experience. I don't think we've ever seen a combination of two leaks. One is a call between Witkoff and Yuri Ushakov, the senior advisor to President Putin. But the other one is between two Russian officials, the Kirill Dmitriev, who's the official negotiator on behalf of the Kremlin with the United States on all matters relating to peacemaking in Ukraine, and Ushakov, again, the top senior advisor to Putin. Now, what these two calls show to us is that there was, and in fact, a collusion. I couldn't say it in any other way. I couldn't describe it with any other verb or adjective, but it's a colluding between the person who's supposed to represent the United States' interest in the negotiation and the Russian official in how to actually gaslight, how to manipulate the American president into accepting deal terms that favor the Russian government only. That's kind of the nut and bolt of these two leaks. But equally, this sheds light on the origin story of these 28-point terms that were passed on and given as an ultimatum to the Ukrainian side a couple of days ago. They were presented as an American invention, as an American creation. But in fact, my own reporting earlier suggested this was a Russian boilerplate that was created 6 months ago or more. And essentially, it was just passed on to the United States to be presented as an American position to the Ukrainian government. And these calls actually confirm exactly that. We hear in these calls, we see in the transcripts that the Russians are talking between themselves whether or not the Americans will make even the smallest of changes to this.
I just want let me jump in here because I want to read these parts. So you're talking about the peace plan, right? So Witkoff was trying to do everything he could to help the Kremlin get a peace plan out there. So Witkoff says in the transcript that Bloomberg's put out between Witkoff and the senior Russian negotiator, Witkoff says, you know, I have the deepest respect for President Putin. Maybe he says to President Trump, you know, Steve and Yuri discussed a very similar 20-point plan to peace. And I think, Yuri, the president will give me a lot of space and discretion to get to the deal. Now, that's extremely disturbing to read. But then, Christo, the call that you mentioned between the two Russian officials. This is, I don't want to say the cherry on the top because that implies something good. But this makes the point. The two Russian officials say to each other, I think we'll just make this paper from our position and let them do it like their own. but I don't think they'll take exactly our version, but at least it'll be as close to it as possible. That is what your reporting said, Christo, and then you see this in black and white. This is incredible.
Correct. I need to correct a little bit the translation that Bloomberg published, because the real translation of the Russian is, let's give them our version and they'll pretend it's their own. They'll make it as if it's their own. And these are really disturbing words. And they essentially confirm my own finding, which is that much of what we saw in these 28 points reflects something that I saw, that I was read into 6 months ago by a Russian insider who told me this is what we plan to propose to the United States. So essentially we're seeing Steve Witkoff siding with something that is a Russian proposal, substantively a Russian proposal. Maybe there are a couple of these 28 points that were added later, but they don't reflect the core of a pro-Russian position. And trying to convince Trump to make him believe that it's his own. It's essentially gaslighting the American president. I don't see it any other way.
Well, I mean, there's other words that could be used in the context of what we talked about in our last block, though. I want to be careful with words we use in this context, but it's very disturbing. I am curious because, Christo, you've had this reporting. You've been saying this, right, that there was a Russian plan that matches this one. Now that these transcripts come out, this all becomes, disturbingly clear. Who do you think leaked these transcripts? How do you think they got them?
Well, what we can be sure is that it's not a U.S. leak. I cannot see any situation in which a U.S. entity such as the NSA would consider leaking this, considering that there's an American government official on the calls. But we have at least two other strong candidates for this leak. One is any European agency that would be disturbed by hearing this, that they would have been able to see the danger of what they're hearing in case they were tapping this. And the second one would be an actual insider in the Kremlin, one of their intelligence services that are trying to torpedo the peace process or any semblance of a peace process, and there are many of those. But in terms of the feasibility of such a leak, let me just confirm that our previous reporting over 10 years, early in my career at Bellingcat and recently with the Insider and Spiegel, has found hundreds of cases in which government officials, Russian government officials in very sensitive positions, are using regular telephone lines instead of encrypted messengers, just because it's easier for them and they feel that there's impunity for what they're doing. And such regular telephone calls can be intercepted and decrypted by most European agencies. So it's either a European country or the Kremlin or an insider of the Kremlin that leaked this, in my view.
All right. So, Christo, Trump was just talking on Air Force One. He just went down to Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday. And he is saying that Russia's making big concessions in all of this. Here's what he just said.
Concessions, a big concession is they stop fighting and they don't take any more land.
What does it say to you that that's how the President of the United States defines a concession?
Again, I mean, now that we've seen the transcript, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he's hearing a completely irrational version of events, of the universe, from the person that he's tasked with giving him the best read of what the Russians feel about it. If that's coming from Steve Witkoff, maybe Trump really believes that. But in actual fact, none of the points that we saw in the 28-point proposal present any concessions on behalf of Russia. All of that is pro-Russian. Even the one item that was included there that may have appeared to somebody reading it as a Russian compromise, which is the deployment of fighter jets in Poland to protect Ukraine, even that most likely is something that the Russians insisted in order to prevent Ukraine from buying their own fighter jets from European providers, which is something that Russia has been very concerned about. So I do not see a single point that is a concession by Russia.
Christo, thank you very much. I'm grateful for your time.
Thank you.